energy, as I'm sure everybody listening to this podcast knows, is hugely important to the state of North Dakota, which is why, because so much of our energy policy is obviously tied up in federal policy as well, it's important when we get a visit from a national leader on energy policy, and that person visiting North Dakota today is Trump administration Secretary of Energy Dan Brouillette. Mr. Brouillette, thank you for your time and coming on the podcast today. And what did you come to North Dakota to talk about? I mean, what's your purpose of your visit here?
Well, thanks, Rob. It's great to be with you today. I really appreciate the opportunity. I'm here to do a number of different visits. I'm going to be at Minot Air Force Base earlier this morning because most people don't realize that the U.S. Department of Energy has an important role to play with national security. We actually manufacture the warheads that are carried on those B-52 bombers coming out of Minot every day. And we also make the warheads that go on the ICBMs. So, as you know, North Dakota is a very important part of our national security in that you have two of the three legs of our triad with regard to our nuclear deterrent. So I'm here to check on the progress that we're making with Minot in that effort. But I'm also here to talk to oil and gas producers as well as some of the coal producers so that we can figure out what we need to do to ensure their viability moving beyond this pandemic. We've all taken an extremely large hit with the downturn in demand for refined products like gasoline and diesel. And it has created some enormous challenges in the production industry. So be it coal, be it oil, be it gas, everybody is suffering. And I'm here to listen and learn and perhaps develop some new ideas about how we might be constructive and helpful.
It's interesting bringing up coal, and obviously, like you said, everybody's suffering right now. But some of the big news we got in the coal industry this year is Coal Creek Station, which is south of Minot, between Minot and Bismarck, North Dakota's largest coal-fired electrical plant, North Dakota's largest electrical plant. Unique situation in North Dakota. Our coal plants sit right on top of our coal mines. They are hugely efficient, but the folks who own Coal Creek Station, Great River Energy, have decided to shut it down, and their justification for doing so are the economics. Now, I look at the economics of the coal industry, and it seems very heavily impacted by politics, which is to say that we have put in place a lot of policies that tend to promote one type of energy over another. Now, I don't think we should keep open energy plants just for their economic impact. Time moves on. We discover new ways of doing things, and we have to adapt. But when we're looking at what I perceive to be a market situation that's created by politics, and then you have a coal plant that's going to close, I mean, that's hundreds, if we want to count indirect jobs, thousands of jobs in central North Dakota, that could devastate whole communities. I mean, businesses are going to close, schools are going to close. That's terrible. Do you have thoughts on that situation where we're looking at coal trying to compete in a modern energy market that is heavily impacted by politics? And by politics, specifically, I'm talking about the wind production tax credit as a big factor.
There's no question about that, Rob. I mean, these are, I might phrase it a little differently. These are markets, yes, created by politics. They're created by government. And that's important for consumers to understand. It's important for industry to understand. What happens in the marketplace and, within the, what's called MISO, M-I-S-O, which is the regional transmission organization here that runs the electricity grid in this part of the world. They create auction markets. And the rules for those auction markets are, in some cases, distorting the economic viability of these various facilities all across the country. And it's not just here in North Dakota or in the Midwest. It's all across the country. We see it very acutely in places like Pennsylvania, New York, in the Northeast, where certain forms of energy are given priority. So if you're a wind producer or if you're a solar producer, you're given priority in the market. And in many cases, you can bring into these auction markets your subsidies, which allows you to price your product at below zero pricing in some cases. So you don't have to be a PhD economist to figure out that if your competitor can price their product at below zero, you're probably going to be uneconomic if you can't do the same thing. And that's what's happening all across the country. That's why the work that's being undertaken by FERC, the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, is so important. They've proposed a rule. It's called a minimum offer price rule. And the purpose of that rule is to eliminate the subsidies that are being brought in primarily by some of the renewable forms of energy. And, some have criticized that effort as an effort to save coal or to save nuclear. It's not. It's to eliminate the distortions in the marketplace that are driving our baseload power away. And, if anyone sort of misses the point on why baseload power is important, you only have to look to California to see what it looks like without it. Rolling brownouts, blackouts potentially throughout the country. It's very, very important that we not allow these facilities, like the major coal facilities or like the major nuclear facilities, be retired artificially and much too quickly.
I want to talk about that. I mean, because grid reliability seems to be an important factor. And in all due respect to our friends in California, California is a wonderful place, but California ain't North Dakota. You can have a brownout in North Dakota, and given their famously temperate climate, I don't want to say that people aren't put in danger, but it's let's say it's less dangerous than if we lose power here in North Dakota. I've been tracking some of the recent testimony before our state legislature, where folks from MISO, the independent the system operator that you're just referring to, have come in and they've talked about 3 instances in the last, gosh, I think it's like 18 months or maybe 2 years, where our region has been very, very close to exactly what California has gone through. And to me, I think that's as bad as that is in California, and I don't want to make it sound like it's a small thing in California, because it's not. If we lose power in North Dakota when it's 30 below outside, people are going to die. And less importantly, but still very important, there's going to be a lot of property damage when pipes start freezing and all the other terrible things that can happen. I mean, that could be devastating for our state if we lost power, and it seems like we're close to it. So how do we fix that problem?
You are close to it. I'm aware of the situation we had in 2018, and there was one other incident that caught my attention as well, where you came dangerously close to being in a position of not having the power that you needed. This case study in California, I think, is a case study in how not to do energy policy. Their whole strategy was, let's go 100% renewables. And should we need baseload power, should we need extra electricity, we'll just buy it from Arizona, Nevada, some other state, they'll sell it to us. I liken it to the young person or any person who decides that, hey, I'm not going to buy a car because, I'm environmentally sensitive and I don't want to pollute the environment. I'm not going to buy a car. If ever I need one, I'm just going to borrow my friend's car. Well, that might be fine until you both need it at the same time. And then perhaps it's not there. And that's what happened in California. When the heat affected the state, it also affected Nevada and Arizona. So they decided that they were going to keep their baseload power because they wanted their hospitals to have lights and they wanted to be able to have air conditioning. So there was no power to sell to California. And that's why you saw the brownouts. And while, your point about, the climate in California may be such that, perhaps you don't need air conditioning today or you don't need heat, the bottom line is that, in certain cases, California had to ask our defense installation to turn their power usage down so that they could provide electricity to other parts of the state. Now think about that. Were they putting our national security at risk? We don't know yet, but we possibly, might reach that point sometime in the future. And it's very important that we learn from this example of California. We don't want to see that happen in places like Nevada. We don't want to see it happen in places like.
We don't want to see it happen anywhere. I mean, I don't want to make it sound like North Dakota is more important than these other places. I don't want it to happen to anybody.
Exactly.
It's a terrible thing. And I got to think, parts of Nevada, when it's 115 or whatever, as a North Dakotan, I think about that and I just melt. Like, how I don't even comprehend temperatures that high. One last question. So on coal, and then I want to talk a little bit about oil and gas, but we're at a point, I mean, all of this is going on. How did we, obviously, we distorted the markets and we've done all these things and we've identified the problem, but is it going to, because right now Coal Creek Station is going to close. That's a massive baseload energy for our region. That power gets sent, right now into Minnesota, but that's still part of our region. To me, it just seems like we're past the tipping point. I mean, I'm looking at how do we roll this back and get back to a point where we get our energy is dictated by the marketplace. And hey, if the marketplace dictates, saying wind is what works and solar is what works, and we're making that because we've developed new technologies and there's storage capacity, then I'm all for that stuff. I just want what works. How do we get back to what works is what's driving our energy policy, not, whoever has the most lobbyists or whoever the politicians have decided is the favorite son in the energy industry.
Mm-hmm. No, it's a good point. I mean, I think we get back to what works by studying what doesn't work. And again, we're looking at California as a place that doesn't work right now. We have to have a clear-eyed assessment of these subsidies and these market rules in places like MISO and places like PJM in the Northeast. We've got to eliminate those distortions so that businesses can make rational economic decisions. I mean, I'm not going to criticize the decision made by the folks at the coal facility here because they're acting in an economically rational way. They have a fiduciary responsibility to their owners, their shareholders, and they're going to act accordingly. It's our job in the government, however, to look at these distortions in the marketplace and eliminate as many as we possibly can. And the next step in this, too, Rob, to be honest, is to look at the next stage of technology development. And that's why, the facilities at EERC at University of North Dakota are so important to DOE because they're helping us define those. They're helping us to help develop those. And importantly, not only just do the research and development, but transfer those technologies to the private sector. Very key component, and that's why we started a new office at DOE, Office of Technology Transfer. The U.S. taxpayers have paid for this research and development. We want them to have it. So we've got to transfer it back to the private sector as quickly as possible.
So I want to switch to talk about oil and gas. The Trump administration, I think it's been a good time for the oil and gas industry under the Trump administration. I think it was frankly, it was a good time for oil and gas under the previous administration, although maybe they don't always like to admit it. You look at a lot of the economic recovery that happened from the 2008-2009 collapse, under the Obama-Biden administration. A lot of that was driven by oil and gas development, which they don't maybe like to talk a lot about. But in the here and now, obviously there's market conditions and the coronavirus, and that is what it is. North Dakotans are used to the volatility of the oil and gas industry. We're all hoping that they're going to come back, but I think our state's prepared for that. The other thing is political uncertainty and legal uncertainty, I guess, which is maybe the same thing. Currently the Dakota Access Pipeline, which is hugely important to oil and gas fields, the status of that is up in the air. It's in the courts. At one point, a court issued an injunction. We're going to shut it down. Now, maybe we're not going to shut it down. Nobody really knows what's going to happen there. We now have a presidential administration. Your boss's opponent, Joe Biden. He says yesterday in Pennsylvania he doesn't want to ban fracking, but yet all during the primaries he was saying, "Oh no, we're going to get rid of fossil fuels. We're going to ban fracking." All those things. Those are very important things. And I think it's very, very hard when you think of the sort of investment it takes to develop oil, and particularly in a place like North Dakota, where we have some challenges with the weather. We have some challenges in getting the oil out, over transportation. The people who make the investments in those things are looking at this environment and thinking to themselves, how do we make these investments that are inherently risky anyway, but are all the more risky because of the politics playing around it? How do we provide some certainty to say, yes, we're going to continue to invest in oil and gas, these energies that everybody in the United States is using to one extent or another? How do we create certainty in that marketplace?
Mm-hmm. Well, the first step that we take as government officials, especially in places like the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission or the DOE, is to provide regulatory certainty. So you know what the rules are before you even begin the process of investing money or putting a shovel in the ground. You know what the rules are. And it's very important that we do that very clearly and transparently. And that's what the president's directed me to do. So we've taken some steps. One quick example in the LNG space, there was something called a public interest test. If you wanted an export facility for LNG, you came to DOE, you had to demonstrate that it was in the public interest. And that was simply to begin the process of getting the permits at another regulatory agency. So we looked at that and said, wait a minute, when is it not in the public interest to create jobs and economic activity in our country? The answer to that's clearly never. It's always in the public interest to do that. So we just eliminated that step in the process, which sounds minor, but saves millions of dollars in legal fees because you have to hire lawyers to do everything in Washington, D.C. So, steps like that provide regulatory certainty, and that's very important for us to do. The legal environment has become the new battleground for many of these infrastructure projects. I work closely with companies who are trying to site pipelines all over the world and all over the country, and we have helped people like Energy Transfer Partners with Dakota Access Pipeline. We filed a friend of the court brief in their favor or in support of what they are trying to do. We think the judge's decision is wrong, and we will continue to argue that in the court. So we're going to be very strong advocates for companies that want to develop infrastructure all throughout America. The challenge we have now in America is not so much the production. North Dakota, Oklahoma, Texas, Louisiana, where I grew up, we figured out the production side of this issue. Fracking is an important technology. It has made us the number one producer in the world of both oil and gas. Our challenge today is getting that product to market. It's getting it to the places where it needs to be within our country, and it's getting it to our coastlines and to export facilities so that we can sell this product around the world. And that's been the mission of this administration. It's going to continue to be the mission of this administration. It's a directive I have from the president, and we're firmly committed to that. With regard to your comments about fracking and some of what I would refer to as the left wing of the Democratic Party. They may say they're not against fracking, but I think you stated exactly right. They are against fossil fuels. So by definition, that means you oppose fracking. And if you eliminate this technology, if you eliminate this industry, that's 19 million jobs, according to the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, that simply go away. So with all of the economic pain that we're feeling today because of this pandemic, they would add on top of that the loss of 19 million additional jobs by eliminating fossil fuels and eliminating fracking technologies.
Secretary Brouillette, I've used up all the time that you made available to me. I thank you for making time during your visit to enjoy North Dakota. I think it's just the best place in the world, but I might be a little biased. But enjoy your time here, and thank you for coming out, and thank you for your time today.
Hey, thank you, Rob. It's great to be with you.